Secrets of the Kaula Circle is a story about true experiences written in a fictitious manner. The original publishers removed portions of the text due to their own views on the ideas presented in an attempt to cast the cult in an entirely negative light. The events in the story are not entirely true, and are at times made up along with the names of the characters. But the mystical experiences, practices, rituals, and other occult things with regards to the Kaula Circle are true. The story itself is written in a way as to allude to certain esoteric, mystical, and occult teachings from the Tantric worldview. What is meant by this is that, for the reader, there is a certain amount of reading between the lines and seeing things from many different perspectives that needs to be done to get the most out of the story. There is much to be learned about this misunderstood sect of Kaula Tantra, and much that has been purposely hidden away by the practitioners. The Kaula Circle has been demonized and driven underground by the orthodox Hindu sects for their unorthodox and occult practices, many being sexual in nature, of attaining divinity, union with God, or enlightenment. In the third part of this book is a manuscript on the science of the breath. These are some of the secret breath patterns and their meanings taught and practiced by the yogis of Tibet. The breathing patterns are incorporated into many practices, from meditation and tantric ritual to dream yoga. Without further ado, here is Secrets of the Kaula Circle. Part 1. Introductory Chapter. I am Mary De La Mont. My great-grandfather was the Duke of blank. His father was blank. But it is better not to name him, for he was ashamed to own the offspring of his morganatic marriage. And I, who have now naught of shame, may still respect the shame of others. The Lama told me that I was of a descent far beyond the Buddhas, and that I brought with me a name of my own, Yasodhara of the Immortals, and my vanity made me believe him. Last births? I live alone now, untainted by the company of the gods he conjured for my amusement, men or beasts. I have dreamt strange dreams, and in one of them I dreamt I was a mortal, Mary De La Mont. Both my parents were very rich, and I was their only child. They educated me in a manner befitting their position, and left me their money when they died. They gave me little of their confidence or love. They were hypocrites, but hypocrisy is quite usual amongst men, and I learned from them to hide my real feelings, and to deceive. I really married, a Lama at the age of 26. But no one knew it. And but for this confession, none would have ever known I was one of those European women who are made for sadhus, and amongst the thousands of deluded women who prostrate before lamas, I was one of the most deluded. I saw the Lama's eyes flash, with interest, the first time he caught sight of me, a white woman so different to the others. From that day onwards, I saw him daily. He deprived me of much, beauty, ideals, and money, but in the end, I believe, I deprived him of greater things. It is no joy to write this. Long afterwards, when I was disgusted, truly disgusted, both spiritually and physically, he still wanted me, but he counted the agony he suffered at my refusal to live with him any more, fair price for the pleasure he had craved. He was a strange man. I gained from him strange wisdom. The measure of his strength cannot be judged, even by me, his weakest link. I thought I loved him, and though I love him no longer, still there has been that strange link of husband and wifehood between us that bids me still remember. I gave him all I had to give, little enough now, I think. He paid dearly for that seed of lust in him which, despite his years of austerity, had not been completely burned, and was brought by my presence to full life. I shuddered often at his ugliness, his crudity, and his strength, but I submitted to his wishes all the same. He was so strange, so compelling, so sure of me. He placed me under a spell, bewildered me with the glamour of power. He told me that for 7 births I had been his wife. They always tell you that, I hear. And for 8 years of this mortal life of mine, I was to remain his, body and soul. And afterwards, he said, his vision was clouded by his desire, and he could not see properly. Indian and Tibetan alike spoke of my husband with hushed breath, a Mahatma, a man of superhuman power. I too thought that through him I might reach godhood, not God, mark you, but godhood. At first I wanted to reach only God, but his devotees laughed. They told me that the Lama himself was God. And he allowed me to think of him as Buddha. From that first day he singled me out with favor, and I sat hour after hour at his feet, watching the multitude throng around him and worship at his feet. I loved him then, not as a man, but as the emblem of goodness and love. And now love and goodness are myths to me forever. He said I was the greatest Yogini of any world, and begged me, finally, on his knees to marry him. He said that my youth and beauty had driven him mad. He assured me I would gain superhuman powers by the union, even if he gained the dire displeasure of the Kaula Lama and his dead guru. Something weak in me made me yield my body unresistingly to this man of an alien land. Some debauch themselves for wealth, some for lust. I debauched myself in a search for God. But there was a lack of balance here too, in this wild desire to find him at any cost. But I was 26, my own mistress, and had sufficient of wealth. Why should I care? If I helped to hide my marriage, it was because of the Lama's bidding. I had read much, and one story in an old book stuck in my mind and haunted me. It described certain magical rites in a temple, partially correct, as I and the reader will soon be aware. A young and lovely girl was brought to an altar, before which lay a sarcophagus, in which reposed a very old man, some thousands of years old, it was believed. The girl approached the recumbent man and placed the nipples of her breast, first one, then another, in his mouth. The corpse-like creature, whose mummified lips could not, at first, hold the firm nipples, began suddenly to suck heartily, and soon grew young. He then tried to clasp the fainting girl in his arms, but she eluded him, floating far above the concourse of chanting worshippers. Returning to earth at last, she again allowed him to drink of her body. He was now strong, young, and beautiful, and he fled away with the girl in his arms. This weird story haunted me, for at nights I too floated gently above the world with a strange man, life of my life, who drew me down to earth and to his embraces. I feel some pale tremor of passion as I write, but I dare not call it evil, for I have, long since, forgotten the definition of good and evil. I have the Lama's photograph before me, and I never look at it, now, without a shudder. The coarse mouth, the strong jaw, the flattened nose, the indifferent forehead, the brilliant slanting eyes under their thin eyebrows. How I had dreamt that I loved him as a mate. He has taught me one thing, to fear nothing on earth, so I do not fear him either now. I have never forgotten his training, never will. I gained much wisdom from him, strange powers, experienced many delights, and dying I can forgive him all. For it was better for me that the seed of all of this should ripen to destruction. Did I say he suffered more than I? I was wrong. He could not suffer even as much, because he was never human. I do not know, even now, whether he was superhuman or subhuman. I cannot appeal even to God to decide for me, or inspire me here, for I am not sure any more whether God belongs to him or to me, or who he is, or what he is. It was so easy in the olden days to be so sure. He was in the heavens somewhere, a man of our sort, great and holy, but invested by men with their own faults and virtues in an exalted degree. All was very clear in my ignorant days. Now, when I am counted wise, it is muddled, and I am only sure that I am to die. I am still not sure, however, whether to be glad or sad at my approaching death, for I do not know if life restarts there, or ends, or when, or where. The Lama pandered to my vanity. He said that what I willed would move the world, and I have often experimented to find out if this were really true. I found at least that, after my marriage, I could bring down rain or snow by willing hard for both. But the Lama did not want me to do this whimsically, because he said it was not well to interfere in the magic of another. The whole world, he said, is magic. You must not let your magic interfere with the magic of any person made great by absorption of smaller and subordinate wills. Devotees of every single religion, he told me, made God and his power. I have paid for the power I possess. I had indeed strange powers, or it was part of a dream. Once I wanted to be a deer, so I whispered a mighty word, droning it to a sound, and I left my body, and I entered through the left ear of a deer, and I whispered through his mouth the mighty name, dancing through luxuriant jungles, nibbling here, nibbling there, throwing up my head at the sound of the panther above the stream, but without fear. Was he not also myself? I nearly ended, forever, a deer, for I could not, after a while, conceive again my womanhood, and only by the Lama's help I came forth from the deer's body with a woman's consciousness in my prone body. Do I write of incredible things? Perhaps I am a century before or after my time. I entered Tibet from Kashgar, disguised as a Buddhist nun in a palanquin, escorted by many hundreds of nuns and monks. The Lama was following us, and we waited for him in the Nal Gufa. In this cave, it is believed that the Pandava brothers of the Mahabharata rested on their journey to Kailasa, and in this cave too, the Lama said, 20,000 lamas had meditated and attained nirvana. Perhaps it is true as anything else in this world. But I have come across many Nalgufas in many mountains, and the same story of the Pandava brothers is told at each one of them. The Lama held a large court there, blessing thousands of devotees by touching them with the long flag he held in his hand. Thus did the Lama impart a certain power to his worshippers. Oxygen, he said, for oxygen was his new modern word. There were many merchants in the assembly whom he had helped in material ways. He had told them when to buy cotton and when to sell it, when to buy gold and when to dispose of it, and when to keep it. He regulated the markets of the world from his Himalayan cave. It is the bare truth, I write. Markets were controlled from far-off villages. Prince and peasant alike tramped through the dense jungles to pay the Lama obeisance. But I saw that all came to him through some desire or other. Few wanted devotion to God, but many wanted sons, desired health, wealth, and all craved power, power. Was I alone of that vast and strange crowd who had no material desire in my heart, who had only wanted to be nearer to God, to know Him?
Perhaps the very arrogance of my want proved my undoing.
Who can know God? My palanquin was carried by the wild people of the mountains, and they appeared to me half men, half animals. Judging them now, at this distance of time, very dispassionately, I think they are not, really, men at all. In Tibet they call my own people barbarians, but I, whom they once worshipped as the incarnation of the goddess, tell you that they are more men than they. In my own husband I found less of humanity than in the men I had hitherto met. I believe, though I have often failed to believe even my belief, that he might, at one time, have loved me as a man loved a woman. And if this is so, it is his only link to the world of man. But the Kaula Lama, who hated me for a reason, of which I shall write more fully later, had nothing in him akin to man. His followers agreed to this thesis, but they said he was of the immortals. He knew my antipathy towards him, and by this clairvoyance he knew also that I should write of things forbidden. I shall curse you, he warned me, but I thought, I shall use their own magic against them, test the willpower they have developed in me for their own uses, and spend it against theirs. The Kaula Lama continued to read my thoughts, to my own mortification. He told me of a devil king who, by his austerity, won a boon from the great god Shiva, that even the immortals would become ashes if a certain yantra were placed on their heads. The devil king tried to test it on Shiva himself, who fled from the terror of his own gift. "Write, mad woman," said the Kaula Lama. "Write if you dare." My Lama said, "If you destroy all idols of worship, what then will the world worship? The world always worships false idols. Will you then destroy all faith?" I feared for a long while. Would my words leave the world a little more stricken and bereft of faith? But I have decided finally to write, and what I write is the bare truth. Yet, do I really care if the world believes my tale? Why should I care? I bore the Lama 5 Mongolian children. Only the last had my eyes, the dark blue eyes of France. And I was afraid when I saw those sad, dark blue eyes. How did those lotus blue eyes get mixed up with slanting eyes? Lotus blue eyes, my own eyes, have looked out from a baby's dead face, and have reproached me, and I must write lest some other foolish woman leave beaten tracks and lose her soul.
Let me get back to my tale.
Chapter 1. In an Underground Temple. There are secret corridors under every important temple and old pagoda of India, Tibet, and Burma, and many a one who disappears from the world of today dreams happily or unhappily under one or the other, for opium, caffeine, and the soma plant still give to man a happy oblivion, which he fears so much when it is called death. But perhaps he fears that death will not give him oblivion. I sat at the feet of the Lama because I wanted to know of Mahatmas and reach divinity through yoga. I repeat this, a protesting too much, perhaps, and my words may lose value, but this sad protesting is to emphasize my tale, not to excuse myself. I sat, one of thousands, day in and day out, a little on one side away from them all, the veil of my topi covering my face and my eyes on the face before me, the man to be my husband. I watched men and women crawl before him like whipped animals, finding heavenly joy and consolation in the mere touching of his feet. I dreamt of goodness, happiness, and perfection of spirit. Then, one day, I found mingling in my dreams alien thoughts which I know now were never mine. How I prayed in agony of spirit that I might die before I profaned this holy man by my mundane thoughts of earthly love. When I felt I loved the Lama, I saw him suddenly smile. I know now that he had gained me at last by what the Tibetans call the magical will, but what we of the Western world call hypnotism. He bade me remember my past births, teaching me the process, to remember everything of my life, down to the first conscious act or thought. As I could not go further back than myself, a child of 3, my head ached intolerably. He desisted then, and bade me come that night with the wife of one of his devotees to his cave, and he would show me something strange. I consented. You will not be afraid? No. Tell no one of your coming here, but make an itinerary of sorts, and tell your people that you are following that itinerary. There must be no hue and cry about your whereabouts. I felt repelled, then I remembered. I was not afraid, but I loved truth, and that my spiritual guru bade me deviate from it outraged me not a little. It was the first of many doubts. He met them all, combated them all. I would go to God that I had followed my instinct that day when that first doubt came, to run away from him, get back to my old life and friends. I remembered an Irish boy who had wanted to marry me, a blundering, stupid boy with a hearty laugh and a healthy fear of all things abnormal, human, certain, correct to type. He would never have bidden me lie, would never have cared for the maintenance of his own reputation at the expense of mine. I know now the first man was a better man. But I obeyed the Lama, and told my friends and servants that I would be away for an indefinite time with other friends. I took with me only one servant, Chong Fu, who was devoted to the Lama, and I too bade Chang Fu again, using the Guru's name, Verakit, repeating in the bazaar that we were going to friends, some of the Sahib Alok we had met at Calcutta. Chang Fu and I went to the temple, and I met his little wife who was to be my chaperone. She gave me tea and the most delicious little puffs filled with coconut, raisins, and musk. I loved the little thing. She too adored the Lama, whom she called the 27th Tirthankar. Her utter devotion to the Lama reassured me not a little. It was she who took me underground, a man preceding us with a light. She held my trembling hand whilst the Brahmins purified me, and the Lama and I walked 3 times round the sacred fire, my sari tied to his neckcloth. Before parting, they gathered the dust from both our feet and applied it to their eyes and forehead. It all seemed quite natural, as if it had happened, as the Lama said it had, thousands of times before, centuries ago. He indicated a bed of grass, on which I sat mechanically, whilst he bade me over and over again to remember. I remember, too, the heaviness of my slumber that night. I woke with no sense of strangeness in being in that place. I felt drugged, numb. The next morning food was brought to me, food that I remember was delicious. Curds, lentils boiled in milk, with butter. Vegetables prepared in strange ways. Milk smelling of freshly plucked roots, almonds, musk, and saffron. I sat in meditation all day, and slept heavily at nights with the Lama sleeping by me, and found no incongruity in his presence. Time stood still. Life had become one strange quietness, eating, meditating, slumber, always quietness, not unmingled with joy. I am sure now, by my heavy slumber, I was either doped or under a hypnotic spell. I repented of not, and often, I think, I reveled in my utter surrender to the will of my husband. There was no heaven above for me, no world. Why should there be? Life was best thus, I thought, a drifting underground, a sweeping of itself in great and tender waves of emotion to nothingness. Mary De La Mont had gone away forever. That experience in the underground cave left me devoid forever of any capacity for emotion or happiness. One day the Lama said he had to leave me, and though I wept, he insisted that it must be, for his pupils awaited him and his preaching. He bade me return to my house, whence he would send for me again, and he said he would take me into Tibet to remain with him forever. So, weeping, I had perforce to obey him, and to come from my slumberous depths to the house on the hills that is mine, and from these sensuous dreams I woke to the reality that I was to be a mother. I felt no fear, but to whom should I confide this secret? I wrote to the Lama of my condition, and asked Chang Fu to bring an answer, but the Lama gave none. Indeed, he sent my servant away with rough words. He, too, feared a scandal. I realized that his marriage was only known to the few, that he wished to pose to the world at large that he still kept the vow of chastity. I also realized that he did not want to be compromised, and cared little for my predicament. Thank God, I had plenty of money, but I was forced to go far away from the haunts of men, taking with me an Irish midwife to whom, perforce, I confided the secret of my marriage to a Mongolian. We left the track of man, and at the dak bungalow at Garabara, I spent the night.
I heard
The river Jumna flinging itself down to the plains below, listening to the monotonous clang of its fierce impetuosity. Not a note was changed, always the same unfailing, unerring, definite roar. It drove me almost mad at last. Then I heard nothing. I was given chloroform. I suffered much. There was no doctor, and the midwife, shuddering for her certificate if I died, did all on her own initiative, helped by some women from the village. The baby died, and I nearly died. All the children died. The Lama said that had they lived, they would have ruled the three worlds, the world of gods, men, and beasts, and have been the messiahs of the world. I do not believe it now, but I did then, and the thought gave me some upliftment. Chapter 2. Magic. The Lama did everything according to whether his breath came through the right or left nostril. Chang Fu went to him once and assured him that he believed me dying.
But because the Lama's right breath was not working, he was obdurate and refused to leave the temple. Also, I have to record it, a number of people were coming to do him obeisance. Chang Fu assured me, however, that the Lama walked backwards and forwards, blowing air fiercely through one nostril, then the other. But I think he cared as much for the acquirement of new pupils as for me. However callously he behaved, I forgave him and the spell remained. I studied the science of the breath, and found it changed every 24 minutes, coming through the left nostril, sometimes through the right, and sometimes through both. There was an old book about it in Hindi, and I studied it carefully. It belonged to a famous Lama. I read that all steady actions, purchases, the pacification of anyone, cooking or marriage, the meeting of a friend or old master, should invariably be done when the breath came through the left nostril. Indeed, for the doing of good actions, this breath alone proved favorable. But in charming a woman, stopping a woman, in all cruel and passionate acts, mark the implication, the right breath was favorable. When both breaths were working, it said, not only no act could be successful, but disaster attended on one who acted when both the breaths were working. When these breaths were working, one should pray. When I protested to the Lama about his indifference, he swore that whenever I sent for him, his 2 breaths worked, and he dared not to come. You who read, do not throw your magical will against that greater one. Working with him, all will be well. Working against him, I, who, with a breath, have once ruined a Lama, can testify that my own ruin was greater. I was no longer happy with the Lama. He neglected me, and was often angry with me. I was frightened of his anger, for he had no control of his anger, and beat me with clenched fists till I cried. Equally like a child when he was pleased, his transport passed all bounds. He taught me many quaint arts. Alchemy was one of those arts he really knew. I have indeed made bars and bars of gold and silver from copper and tin. The prepared gold and silver were of a quality far superior to any on the market. The gold was yellower than any known gold, with a glitter that was most attractive and lovely, and the silver too was whiter and heavier. Chang Fu helped me, though he did not know my formula. I have used this gold and silver only for the relief of the poor and suffering, never for myself. I thank God for that now, for I believe it was this gold and silver that bought my soul. I remember that I wanted to advertise for the world's poor to come and take from me as much gold and silver as they would, but the Lama was furious at the very idea. He said that each man had his own destiny, and I interfered at the price of sacrificing my own luck. God himself, he said, never interfered. Already he bade me see, through my impetuosity, the rate of gold had gone down. It was annoying, also, to read that whilst I was making silver, new silver mines were found in Alaska, and my silver was growing valueless. A greater magical will appeared really to be combating mine, and neutralizing the advantages. How do I make my gold? I have left the formula in full to blank if he dares to use it, but better not, for there is considerable risk to be run, and the combating that other will. If the smoke of the arsenic gets into one's eyes, blindness ensues, and the sulfur may explode. But sulfur and arsenic are the juvenile methods of the Western world. I turn mercury into ashes by virtue of a Himalayan herb, and 1 grain alone of these ashes in copper or tin does the rest. Moreover, even a grain of this gold in baser metals turns it into gold, and so on, 11,000 times, and then stops. You who would make gold, sit at the feet of a Lama. Give him your body, your mind, and your wealth. Produce for him in agony of spirit and body, children. Then the world will be yours, if you can then want it. Wealth untold will be at your disposal, but you will have nothing you want to possess. Innocence, the power to appraise and be happy, these are greater gifts. Once I threatened the Lama that I should divulge all his secrets, and he only smiled, but bade me, more seriously, beware of the curse of the Yogini. I asked him what that was, and he replied that it was the curse given to those who talked too much. Knowledge would teach, he said, but wisdom is always silent. It is because the Sphinx stands silent forever that the ages tolerate its ugliness, and the stony silence that gives power to the idols of temples? The Lama bade me, in all seriousness, to be warned in time that even his power would not be able to save me if I transgressed the law of the Yogini. If you tell anything you have learnt by the virtue of the fact that you were you, paralysis would descend on you, and your lips will be sealed forever. I was frightened then. Do you curse me? I asked shudderingly. One curses oneself, he said carelessly, by one's own folly and impetuosity. The Lama's curse obsessed me when I would write. The tips of my fingers grew numbed, and my toes were as if they were glued together. My spine ached dully and incessantly, and filled me with vague uneasiness. I woke up often at nights with a pulse beating fast at my throat and lights flaming around me. I asked the Lama once if he or I were greater, and he laughed so heartily at my question that I was nettled. But I, of course, yet, he added somewhat sadly, yet with no intention of appeasing me. In the world, you are next to me. You are, indeed, the greatest yogini of the world. He fell into a moody silence. These silences came to him often. I wanted to hear of his early life, and how he achieved his lamahood. But the more I questioned him, the more sullen and morose he grew, and I learnt nothing from him. Had he, too, suffered, I wondered, at the hands of his dead guru? Had he, too, wept in disillusionment, as I have wept? Later I met his brother, and from him I heard of the Lama's life before he took the yellow robe. Their uncle was a great Lama, though he called himself a bhikshu, the beggar. This proud title of the beggar to priest may well surprise the Western world, who, thinking in prescribed manner, does not know India at all. No one can be proud in India, not even its princes before those holy beggars. I shall speak of one of these princes later, for he, like me, was caught up in the circle. But not here. I wandered in my thoughts, and then my words. I have often to bring myself up with a jerk to the mere narration of my own story. I have annihilated time in my mind, and when I am careless, everything stands still on a single point of nothingness. The Lama was of a family of very poor Brahmins, mahants of a temple in the Aravalli hills, and it was their duty to perform the daily worship, accept the votive offerings of the village people, tend to the cows, and even to take them out to pasture after the morning's milking. This last duty, more often than not, fell to my Lama, who was only 10 years of age at the time, when fates made of him a neophyte and then a Lama. He had taken the cattle out to pasture on a full moon night. A terrible storm suddenly arose, which devastated the countryside for miles around, and forced the boy and his cows to take shelter in a deserted cave. The cave was very large, and at the furthest end a sadhu sat in deep meditation. The boy of 10 came under his spell. The sadhu, they said, awakened and touched the boy at the back of his neck, and he fell into a strange trance and dreamt wonderful visions. He never really awoke from the trance, they still assert. It was the end or the beginning, who shall say which is right, of the Brahmin youth. The boy's parents came to the cave many times, and wept bitterly, imploring the sadhu to return their son, for at that time they had only one son. The guru dismissed them with rough words, and kept the boy. Long afterwards he relented sufficiently to promise them other sons. The Lama, even at the age of 10, had been betrothed to a priest's daughter, but as he never went back home, there could be no marriage, and the girl died later of a snake bite. The superstitious villagers asserted that the guru himself had, in the form of a snake, bitten her to death. The Lama had 4 brothers in all. The one I saw was the youngest of the 4. He was counted as simple, was 6 feet 7.5 inches in height, and in an eerie way was handsome. He had strange whims and fancies, and was possessed twice a month by something he called his maternal uncle, Mamo. These times he would fling his huge head, crowned with thick, coarse hair, with a flap backwards and forwards, with sufficient force to crick the neck of one less strong. At these times he had the gift of prophecy, and I know the Lama himself took these prophecies very seriously. Kirko had many women for wives. I record these strange things, hesitatingly, wondering whether I do well or not to record the beastliness in man. Sometimes I think the beast is better than man. If he has his moments of uncontrolled passion, it is but to reproduce his kind, obeying only the urge of creation. But man and woman, when he is the defiler of the chalice, and she, the defiled chalice, have fallen below the beast. Chapter 3. The Kaula Lama. From Kashgar we traveled on the main road for 2 days, and as suddenly left the road. The scenery was magnificent, and I was very, very happy amidst the great mountains, despite the hardship we encountered. So great was the charm of traveling through valleys, up hills, the delight of inhaling cool mountain air, and leaving civilization and its tyrannies far behind, caring nothing for elaborate toilets and the paraphernalia of everyday social life. They gave me tea with butter floating on it, and though the Lama lapped it up greedily with much smacking of lips, I could not touch it. The mere sight of the butter floating on the tea made me feel very sick. When I asked for milk instead of butter, there was much laughter on all sides. The Lama, I remember, made a sermon on my preferring milk to the essence of milk, comparing my attitude to that of the worldly man who, not having found the essence of life, spirituality, asked for the inferior part. Was he serious? Was he sincere? I watched him carefully, wrapped in his Lama's robes, seated above the multitude, on a special seat which 2 porters carried for him. He always sat above the crowd, and I remembered how a famous French prefect had told me that in questioning a person, the surest way to make him feel at a disadvantage was to seat him at a lower level. The Lama dwelt long on virtues which I, who knew him well, knew he least possessed. Yet he spoke with fervor, and I knew that he impressed his followers. Had they vested him, as I had, with the power of their own imagination? Or was he really great, and I alone now incapable of appreciating the greatness? I saw little or nothing of the Lama during this journey into Tibet. I remained exclusively with the nuns, and he with the monks. Only when we reached the lamasery at Purpan did he send for me, and tell me that my room was adjoining his. He commanded me, somewhat roughly I thought, but no doubt for the benefit of a few of the curious who were listening, to prepare him some food, as he was hungry. Chang Fu and I, together, did our best. I was to meet the Kaula Lama the next day, and the Lama bade me be prepared for the great honor in store. He suggested too that I should shave my head, but this I refused absolutely. I had lovely hair, it is lovely even now, and I curl a strand over my finger as I write, and watch its shining silkiness fall, and find still some feint of wary pleasure in the sight. So hard does vanity in a woman die. The Lama, to my surprise, spent part of the night with me, but he appeared different. I found him harsh, felt him restless. He said that he was not prepared to lose me as a wife, but here I must realize thoroughly that my place as an Indian wife was not higher than that of a slave or chattel. I accepted his decision, falling into my usual heavy slumber until dawn, when the bells of the lamasery rang, and 1,000 prayer wheels turned and creaked. The scene outside was beautiful, the tall trees throwing cool shadows, the sun filtering russet, yellow and brown patches onto an emerald green shadow, and sometimes peppering it with bright gold. Had I discussed my upliftment of soul due to the beauty around me with the Lama, he would certainly have ascribed it to the oxygen and virtue of the lamasery. There was a pungent smell of the pines everywhere, which made me draw in long breaths of refreshing sweetness. The pine cones under my sandaled feet gave forth a cracking sound, augmenting the same strange exhilaration that I have since learnt is associated always with a first visit to the mountains and to the pure air of comparative solitude. I drank my morning tea without milk, still refusing the addition of that hateful butter, and ate with relish the dry wheaten cakes prepared by Chang Fu, with a chutney made from some sour herb of the valley. After this meal, I was told I was to meet the Kaula Lama. I neither dreaded nor looked forward to this visit. Subconsciously, I knew I had earned his disapproval. Yet he had sent for me, this Lama of Lamas, and though my husband was nervous and restive, I felt strangely at ease. I was ushered through a temple courtyard to the temple and a cell within the temple, and for some time the darkness made me see nothing, and I grew, for the first time, vaguely unhappy. My eyes growing used to the darkness, I saw on a pulpit at the very end of the long cell, lighted by a pale ray of light falling on his head, the Kaula Lama. How shall I describe him? As I saw him that day, or in the light of the days that followed when I saw him differently? He was very old. They said he was at least 800 years of age. Nothing of him, however, was old except his eyes, and they were indeed old, terribly old, slits in a cold face, burning bright eyes. He was, I felt, uncannily old, weary and indifferent. He bade me be seated, and after the usual obeisances, I sat. I had learnt a little of the language, and this was what he said to the Lama, word by word, imprinted on my brain for eternity. Yes, she is young, strong, and beautiful. Use her for the elixir of life, and give me to drink. The time is near. And the Lama replied sullenly, It is impossible, for she is already my wife, and she has borne me several children. Where had I heard this before? In the Dumas novels? I swear I heard it again under the Tibetan pines. The Kaula Lama said in his penetrating whisper, You are a criminal. You have forced me into death. You most vile. The Lama replied, Take a new birth in one of my children. I won't have her used thus for the present. Later on, when I need her less, try. But she is too much involved now for your purpose. Find a new woman, a virgin, or one who has but 1 or 2 children. Leave her alone. She is now no good for you. This conversation frightened me considerably. Later, I knew the meaning. I was not to be killed, but keep away from monks, my sister's monks, especially whose lips have turned black. For you shall know later why those lips have changed color, and you shall beware. Chapter 4. XYZ. The Kaula Lama's chief pupil was XYZ. From the first, there was some extraordinary hatred between us both. The stranger, because he was extraordinarily handsome, and I was yet young and beautiful. He accounted for his antipathy towards me thus: I had blemished, he said, the fame of the last, Tirthankar, my husband. No one knew XYZ's real name. His pupils spoke of him as the Master. The Kaula Lama, they told me, no longer traveled in his astral body, but his pupil did this often. Incredible though it may seem to readers, I have seen him. We invoked him thus: XYZ, please make us fit by the Taraka Bindu, initiation to realize Brahma in this birth. Come. We lay on our backs, palms downwards, in the death asana, and when he came, our hands flew up involuntarily in the namaskar, hands clasped together in prayer. XYZ, they assured me, was hundreds of years old, living by the elixir of life he steals from women. XYZ was not human. The Lama assured me that he was superhuman. I believed him subhuman. He was like an idol in a Greek temple, and as cold and hard. His eyes looked oddly through the poor human people, women mostly, who prostrated daily at his feet. He had many devotees, and he surveyed them with drowsy brown eyes, drawing reptile-like those who were necessary to his life. He drained them thoroughly, and they left him dizzy with the strange intoxication of utter exhaustion. XYZ feared that I knew much, and where there is fear, hatred comes automatically. Hatred, at least, holds interest, and XYZ knew that I had learnt why his lips were black, and that his youth would remain till another woman would give him the glands of youth freshly distilled from her living body. For this is what they want of women. This is their great secret. I have written to warn those who, like me, stirred by the unusual, have fallen at the feet of powerful men with strange powers, unbound by the conventions and without the compassion of ordinary men. My unusual life had made me lose count of time. I was not sure whether I lived in the past, the present, or presaged the future, or live in all times. In that cave on the mountains of the Himalayas, a madness of the world, or any other, had descended on me. I was happy, like one drugged, wholly submissive to the will of the Lama, who was my husband. Was I ever civilized? Anyone? Or are we all underneath as wild, as passionate, as uncontrolled as ever? Have we only learnt to hide our real emotions to deceive the world, perhaps, but never ourselves? I often ask these questions to myself in my few thinking moments. The Lama and I were educated in different schools. I hated anything not wholly truthful. To him, truth and untruth are the same. He lies without compunction, without thought. And at other times, he is transparently honest. I was clean in my person, fastidious to a fault. He went for months without a bath. I was incapable of hypocrisy, and he? Yet we were husband and wife, and I bore him many children. I wondered what was the affinity that had brought us together, or did repulsion itself bind? I had indeed thought of the Lama as an incarnation of divinity, an incarnation that dealt with untruth. And I married him, thinking him the holiest of men. Perhaps it was only self-pride that held me in its net, for my Lama had prophesied that I was destined to be the mother of the Messiah. I believed that prophecy, too, for a time. XYZ knew of this prophecy. I did not fear XYZ, though he had terrible powers. I have seen whole villages devastated by hailstones brought on by his curse, and one little village alone, marked off by him in his map, as immune, escaped. I write of that which I have seen, not heard, of things perpetuated in the name of magic that would make me believe in the burning of witches. There are devils in men, and men in devils, and the continual warfare of right and wrong will go on till the little earth is snuffed out like another burnt-out candle. But I know that the seeds of every ideal shall remain, and that, greater than the Kaula Lama or XYZ, is God. Chapter 5. Past Births. Once lying in the arms of the Lama, my face pressed against his beard smelling of incense and sandalwood, hearing, as if in a dream, his strange, husky laugh of pleasure. He bade me remember, and I remembered. I was on a blue mountain, probably the Nilgiris, lying on a bearskin in a cave, and I was dressed in rough white wool, and my name, he said, was Kashmi, and his Shraddha. I waited, it seemed, for him all day, anxiously, and at sunset he came and brought me something which we cooked together at the small cooking place. Afterwards, he gave me some intoxicating drug to drink, and later I slept first watching him close, with a large stone, the entrance to our cave. I remembered warmth, languor, and ecstasy supreme. I was he was I, then the faint rushlight faded out into darkness. I awoke as if from a far-off dream, still in his arms, drowsy with the languor and passion of an old, old story. Hypnotism? Witchcraft? Another birth? God knows what it all was. I am writing it down carefully for others to remember, for others to know the methods, others to heed the danger, for it is a greater one than they realize, and I believe the unknown God bids me write. Once again, the Lama bade me remember, and I dreamt I was a Brahmin boy bathing in the cool, limpid waters of Narmada, and he was a girl whom I had seduced to my pleasure on the river shore, whilst the bells of the temple called me in vain to my twilight prayers. I came to my senses. I remember, this time, with a strange new feeling of power. Was that girl really the Lama? The girl had been so humble, so yielding, so weak, and after possession, I had been so utterly indifferent. Was there indeed nemesis in man's allotted fate? And yet again, the Lama bade me remember. And in the new dream, I saw that he was a priest of a powerful temple, and I, a girl of his kith and kind, forbidden to him in marriage by the tenets of his clan, the dicta of his caste. But I became his beloved, all the same, one warm day, whilst he worshipped by the idol of the goddess, and in his mad passion for me, I remember he pushed the idol aside, and we lay in each other's arms by the prostrate goddess. Was it in that birth that the goddess had truly cursed us? For I went through maze after maze, tangled births after births. We wandered together as low-caste people, beggars, always together, seducer or seduced, till again we met, I, Mary De La Mont, and he, a Lama. Were these births true? Had we, who lived in so many dreams for all births, why, life itself is only a dream, really loved each other through them all till now, when we would hate the very memory of each other? Was that the end of life, the breaking of all attachment, the severing of every bond? If past births were true, then he was bound equally with me. I wondered, would he be glad or sorry to be free of me and my glamour? I had no way of reading that queer brain of his, no way of judging the truth of the dreams he showed me by a touch of his hand. I knew that he was capable of the utmost dissimulation, and that he placed me in hypnotic trances. Once, when I was, as usual, half asleep under his touch, he had asked me the means to win me. and learnt the means without troubling to bid me forget the question. I had told him, truthfully enough, that he could win me best by ignoring me after first giving me the warmest of love. For the vanity in women, having tasted conquest, could not bear the semblance of defeat, and she would strive, forever, for the conquest of the apparently won, not even knowing when it was lost. Was this true of all women, I wondered, or was it true only of me? But each woman must answer this to her own satisfaction. Chapter 6. The Kaula Circle. When XYZ knew that I would write of the secrets of the circle, he cursed me in no uncertain words. "White spawn," he spluttered, "I read thy evil heart. If thou darest to write of our ancient mysteries, thou shalt be cursed with plagues worse than those of Egypt." I knew his power too well. He wrote for me, at that time, the name of a certain powerful prince on a piece of bark, and he added a word and a number, and he burnt both, and that prince's people changed towards him, and he was obliged to flee from his capital for his very life. "So shall I write and burn your name," said XYZ. "But I shall write despite XYZ, and if God wills, the world shall read, and know of all these doings." The cult of the circle is already in vogue in Europe, in secret places, and I must tell the world of it all. Whether it was my nerves that had broken down, or whether XYZ had poisoned me, my health began to fail rapidly after his threat. So great is the power of suggestion. At nights it was as if 1,000 red ants walked up and down, nibbling my body, or again, as if red-hot needles ran through every toe and finger. I know I was very frightened, and went down to India to be treated. Sometimes I would shriek aloud, and my servants would fly to my bedside in fright. A doctor was sent for who diagnosed my disease as a bad attack of puerperal neuritis, due to some unknown toxins in my system. He advised me to go to Europe and get an expert's opinion. I think I was mad for a while, for I believed that a man in a cave in Tibet had written my name and number on a bark and had injected these toxins in my blood by his will. I had cursed XYZ in turn, crying out that I too was powerful, learned in spells, that they forgot that for 9 years they had worshipped me as the world mother. The Lama came to see me, and with him was XYZ. They asked me not to worry myself, and returned to Tibet. But some new fear of them had entered my mind, and I refused. They left me sadly. When I was better, I began to write. The Kaula Circle is the circle of the worshippers of the left-hand path, whose secret none but they of this circle have known till now. In this circle, the woman is the mother, but all her desires are fulfilled. That is the vow. Few women come through the ordeal pure, unstained, for it is believed that the husband is born of the mother, and the mother and the wife are interchangeable terms in the circle. The outer court of the temple of the goddess was heaped with raw flesh, fish, and these, with wine, were given to those of the outer circle. Man after man, woman after woman passed by me, singing, reeling, and dead drunk. Later on, they would be forced to drink the 42 bottles of wine prescribed by the rules of the ceremony. Eat, drink, and be merry, and die, for their doom, poor fools, was already on them. They would not remember anything on the morrow. They would not know that their ka-yus, I prefer the Egyptian word here, their vital spirit, loosened by intoxication and passion a little from their bodies, had been captured and absorbed. I still remember that inner courtyard, stark naked men and women, who, from time to time, with excruciating yells, leapt to their feet, shaking their heads backwards and forwards, the women with loosened locks falling in black disorder about their heaving, shaking breasts. A voice would then cry out in deepest scorn the sonorous Sanskrit tantric verse, "Let their desires be satisfied," and there would be a perfect orgy of bestiality. The outer circle absorbed the essence of murdered animals. The inner absorbed them. From the highest to the lowest in the universe, one lived by sacrificing something. It was fair, according to this cult, that Godhead should demand a sacrifice. In the sacrifice of others alone lay his Godhead. What is to be the end? Will the world belong to those who absorb the most? Or perhaps that one will indeed absorb it all himself, again, as the Vedantists declare, like the spider absorbing its own thread? Is it for secrets like these we of Europe come to seek wisdom? Let me tell of them here. I met a European who was one of XYZ's pupils. He called himself by a number. In the beginning, he was extremely handsome. Afterwards, he grew gross. The man of God is beautiful. He had many women at his disposal, and he spoke of them quite calmly and openly. He said that he had several children born to him by them through magic. He learnt many magical processes by which he drew into his circle great phantoms. I witnessed one of his evocations. He had with him a pupil, a thin, long-nosed boy, for whom I conceived a great pity. He was so eager, so thrilled at all, and so sincere. He sat very still, his eyes on the tip of that long nose of his long, thin hands resting on each other, his legs crossed in the lotus posture. I wondered why he had followed the man whose number was 666. For his soul's sake? For the acquisition of good? Or for the acquisition of power? I suspected, always, that the last was the greatest force of all, for the poison of desire is hidden so insidiously in the flower that calls itself goodness as to be unseen before it darts out too late to recognize, to kill. 666 wore a ceremonial robe, had a pentacle, a wand, a sword, and a cup. I watched him from my corner solemnly cleansing the altar with water shaken in drops from a blade of grass, and heard him chant Sanskrit mantras, whilst Tibetan acolytes waved censers of incense. To the beasts the consolation of laughter is denied. I wished that 666 and the thin boy could have laughed. I can still see 666. He was tall and handsome. He had a strong jaw on a massive neck, and in strange contrast, he had small, womanly hands showing up in the dusk, clear white patches against his black robe. I watched that day the spirits he evoked with the help of the lamas. They came first in smoky vapor, emanation of the impurity that comes from desire, and surrounded him like a smoke cloud. I saw spots form in that cloud, and each spot dragged round itself a little more, a little less of his vital force, then enlarged and fall into the shape of phantom figures, called from the forgotten sarcophagi of the world, one of whom, crowned with a diadem and wearing an Egyptian headdress of sorts, came forward threateningly. All of 666's own life force, expended at will on concubines or evocations, and afterwards, these withered husks of rash men and women declaim against God and man, and vainly cry out for the happiness that life no longer holds for them. Have they who cried out ever added an iota to the happiness of the world? They who expect gods, men, and beasts unceasingly to contribute to their needs? I saw 666 fall to the ground, frothing at the mouth, yet he was training his pupil for the same ordeal. 666 wanted his pupil to strengthen his willpower and alertness. He told him not to use the word the or no in any conversation, and should he unwittingly transgress this injunction, he must gash himself on the arm with a knife to make the boy remember his mind's desire. This method, he thought, made the brain watchful. The poor boy was covered with gashes. I am saddened for these wasted lives, and I hope the reading of this slender treatise will prevent the misguided enthusiasts of the world spilling the enthusiasm of youth before strange altars to unknown gods. Chapter 7. The Maharaja of X. Most people remember the late Maharaja of X, who died quite recently in somewhat mysterious circumstances. This strange mixture of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was, at one time, the main topic of talk of more than half of India. So extraordinary and so varied were his eccentricities, yet so perfect and so cultured were his views on life, modeled in phrases above reproach. His cruelties were colossal, but at other times his kindness, his liberality, and the nobility of some of his gestures would take, and indeed, took India by storm. He owns a very lovely palace halfway up the mountains at blank. Tall, debonair, ugly except for his brilliant brown eyes, his orgies in the year blank made him notorious. His own wives, to his credit or discredit, were the principal participators in these orgies, and were added proof, if any were needed, of the statement I make now, that this misguided Maharaja of X was conducting the Kaula Circle and learning the elixir of youth as taught to him by his guru LP, both trying to add to their span of years by the living sacrifice of their life essence of the poor, foolish men and women. But should I pity any one of them, I wonder? Is not the word poor misused? Must there not have been some tremendous affinity that linked and dragged to their doom these wretched men and women? How did I escape, at last, from the terrible net of my own mistake, my own affinity to evil? By some superhuman effort, surely. But have I escaped? I had given freely in the beginning, with desire and love for divine things alone, but I am made beastly. I have given to the beasts the lust of life, and I too am doomed, I fear. I still live, but like 666, by the aid of drugs. Pain, pain, pain. But before I die, I must tell all. I mustn't wander, must conserve all my energies to tell all. Even in the tragedy of the Maharaja of X's life and death, there is a lesson to be learnt, though I, without morals as I am, lay no claim to being a moralist. I dwell on the Maharaja because he too was a victim of a Lama. He too fell for his love of a Kali Yuga guru, and, in the Holocaust, a woman lost herself, body and soul, his wife. The new Maharani was a lovely girl from one of the villages nestling below the Himalayas. There are never wanting in India men who sell these flowers of womanhood to princes, and the Maharaja's emissaries had informed him about her beauty. Maidservants from his zenana had gone personally to assure themselves of the truth of the girl seller's reports. Dasvantpa was very happy in the first year of her married life. She fell under the strange spell of the Maharaja, and she was, for that year, a clean woman who hated the orgies at X. But she was also a full-blooded, sensual hill woman, and wine and rich food changed her mentality. She soon found pleasure in the embraces of men whom her husband forced her to submit to on those full moon nights when the goddess was worshipped in her person. How he laughed at them all, this Maharaja! He had a cynical, bitter humor, and sometimes a clean humor, But this did not save him from his own folly. Sober and watchful, he sneered at their want of self-control, when wine and women took hold, and with what calmness he used the mantras his guru taught him, enabling him to absorb the essence of their youth. People noted how man after man in the Maharaja's service lost beauty, manhood, and health, whilst the Maharaja alone remained young and strong. Ah, well, his time too came at last. Jasvantpa did not live long enough to lose either beauty or health. She died in the full bloom of womanhood, and but for the sad event of her parents' visit to X, she might yet, to her misfortune, perhaps have been alive today. Jasvantpa's parents came to X on the Maharaja's express invitation, though it must be admitted not before those parents had ventured several hints, and had shown much desire to see their daughter in her new role of queen. They came, they saw, and they were delighted. They saw the lovely palace she lived in, her jewels, her clothes, and her numerous maid-servants. They noted that she looked happy and contented, positively sleek with well-being. Had she lived, she would have been very fat in the course of a few years. And Jasvantpa asked of her lord, the Maharaja, a favor, that her mother should not know of her infidelities, even though those infidelities were licensed by her own husband. Whilst her mother was there, let them stop all orgies, she implored him, lest a whisper, even a whisper, reach the poor lady of the simple ideals of a home far from a court, and her heart break. The Maharaja chafed at this request. He was in a wicked mood. Who was this Girasini, with her 2 buffaloes, her 2 bullocks, and 10 acres of land, to tell him, the Lord of Locks, what to do, and what not to do, to foist her code of what was wrong and what was right on him, to judge him by her own law? Poor Jasvantpa, dressed in her wonderful brocades, covered with jewels that would ransom 1,000 kings, with her great black eyes looking so eagerly into life, better, 100 times better, had you too married a Girasya with only 2 buffaloes or 10 acres, a simple Rajputani of wide green fields? Better you had baked for your husband millet bread of your own home, cooked for him brinjals spiced with mustard seed, milked his buffaloes, and from the sweet curd of your setting made his butter and the wholesome ghee that so seldom reaches the markets of India, than acted the royal prostitute. The Maharaja promised Jasvantpa that her mother should never know of her moral downfall. He sent to Jasvantpa a favorite menial of menials, and when she lay drunk with him in bed, she sent hasty word to her mother that her daughter was ill and needed her immediately. And the poor, simple hill mother, hastening to her daughter, saw all. Later on they talked of it together, mother and daughter, and the mother, on her knees, implored her daughter first to kill her wicked husband, and then die. Poor Jasvantpa! She swore at her mother's feet that she would do as she was bidden, and she prayed to her gods for forgiveness that she had not thought of this solution before. Before the final culmination of decay, leaves take on the most wonderful colors, russet, gold, and brown. Flowers give out scents so persistent, so lovely, and withal so elusive, that one forgets that they are the sad perfumes of those already dead. And the realists of the kind I dislike might quote that a corpse, just before dissolution, takes on exquisite hues of delicate, rare, waxen yellow, blue, or mauve. The Maharaja's charm was the charm of the dead, the charm of the unknown, the unusual. I watched men who hated him, absorbed by him, against their better judgment. Dreams, dreams, dreams! One more of a world that has lost itself in a past that is gone forever, painted in here because my memory holds the Maharaja amongst all the figures that colored my brain with the vivid hues of an imagination gone wild. And the man who should have died instead of the Maharaja and Maharani of X, died more justly, was the Sadhu LP, his guru. Chapter 8. The End. An old Sanskrit verse addressed to the unknown God, a song from the lips of a sage who is dying, ran through my head. For thy sake I have renounced the pleasures of this world, for thy sake the pleasures of the next, yet you have not manifested yourself to me, nor have you shown yourself to me in any form. Dying, I say the name of God. I link myself with the broken Christ on the cross. He was greater. He could not have been so cruel to anyone as God, if he really exists outside ourselves, has been to man. The fruit of the knowledge of good and evil that claims to make men as God, the fruit which I have eaten, leaves man isolated from both God and man. I think I must say that, too, of my pitiful self. To be one of humanity is better for man. Man is always above the angels, for were they not commanded to worship him, and God himself had to become man before he could save man? Therefore, man is not a small thing in the universes. This is the grandest thought my philosophy has given me. I must not despair again, for if time is not, neither are we. And if time is eternal, then we too shall dream once again. With the added wisdom of the past, profiting by mistakes and sufferings, and like a painter repainting a picture, mix the colors more carefully, putting them on this canvas of life less hastily. Thank God that memory dies with death, and there only remains from experience wisdom. I have finished what I have to write. I am afraid to reread these papers. I shall close them and seal them carefully, and I do not want to open the envelope again. I cannot bear to reread the tale of one who has nearly lost all faith, both in man and God, especially as I had wanted so badly to retain both. Was my only achievement to know myself? To have discovered the highest values of man only to learn that they are hopelessly linked with those of the lowest? I prayed for a sign that God was, and cried because neither God nor his devotees would or could answer my prayer. I thought, with mad misery, that there was indeed no God to answer my prayers, no goodness, no joy in heaven or on earth. And suddenly my room was filled with the fragrance of roses, red English roses. I turned my head eagerly to the right, whence the sweetness came, and drew in whiff after whiff of the grateful odor. It is not the season for roses. I see that I am not well, but if I am dying, dying happily at last, with the memory of an unknown fragrance, cooling me, saturating me, whose fragrance fills the worlds. Who said that? Hope came to me again. I knew then that God lies in the sweet, tender, simple things of life, and he is the resurrected man, the Christ. Part 3. This manuscript was presented to the author by a yogi. It is a copy of a very old manuscript, and as far as she is aware, it has never been published before. The Science of the Breath. Hatha Yoga. Ha meaning sun, Ta meaning moon. 1. In the human body, the spirit is chained by the breath, and this breath changes every 5 gadis. One element, Vaya, remains in settled order during each gadi. These elements move, and are named after the 12 signs of the zodiac. 1. Aries the ram. 2. Taurus the bull. 3. Gemini the twins. 4. Cancer the crab. 5. Leo the lion. 6. Virgo the virgin. 7. Libra the balance. 8. Scorpio the scorpion. 9. Sagittarius the archer. 10. Capricornus the goat. 11. Aquarius the water bearer. And 12. Pisces the fishes. 2. The breath sometimes comes out from the right nostril, and sometimes out of the left, and sometimes out of both the nostrils. 3. The right nostril is of the sun, Ha, and the left nostril of the moon, Ta, and the science of the breath, pranayama, is, therefore, called Hatha Yoga, the conjunction of the sun and the moon. 4. When two breaths are working, the life runs in the spinal column and is called Sukshmana, literally, very fine one. 5. The Sukshmana breath is for meditation alone, and no worldly action will succeed when this breath is working. 6. The following actions performed when the left breath, Ida, is working, will achieve their full purpose and be successful. 1. All steady actions. 2. Purchases. 3. Travel to distant countries. 4. The pacification of planets. 5. The giving of clothes. 6. Cooking. 7. Marriage. 8. Interviews with superiors. 9. Visiting friends. 10. Business. 11. The earning of money. 12. The entering of a house. 13. The doing of a service. 14. The sowing of seeds. 15. Agriculture. 16. The starting of an austerity, like a yagna. 17. The placing of an idol. 18. The taking of an initiation. 19. The taking and making of mantras. 20. The beginning to learn. 21. The meeting of relations. 22. The conservation of water or irrigation. 23. Alchemy, or the making of alchemical medicines. 24. The learning of arts or science. 25. Puja, or ritual worship. 26. All peaceful and steady actions. 27. The making of a garden. 28. The building of a palace. 29. The digging of a well or tank. 30. The learning of music and dancing. 31. The putting away of valuables. 7. 7. If one has some cause of sorrow, or is suffering from fever or any other disease, it will be lessened whilst the moon, Ta, breath is working. 8. In the performance of all good actions, the moon breath gives peace and success. 9. The following actions performed when the sun, Ha, breath is working will come to success. 1. The art of the use of weapons. 2. The entering into a debate. 3. Gambling. 4. Stealing. 5. Cheating. 6. Hunting. 7. The riding of elephants, horses, camels, donkeys, chariots, and male buffaloes. 8. Swimming in the ocean. 9. The learning of machinery. 10. The giving out of medicines. 11. The making of clothes. 12.
the giving of poison. 13. The driving out of ghosts. 14. Selling and buying. 15. Bathing. 16. Taking food. 17. Mating. 18. Killing. 19. The giving of pain. 20. The easy destruction of enemies. 21. Sleeping. 22. Kissing and embracing. 10. The time of danger from poisoning is when this breath is working. 11. When the sun breath is going on and the moon breath begins, that time is called the time of the crab-bannered deity. 12. If at this time a son is born, he will be very beautiful. Food taken at this time will not be easily digested. An attempt to gain a woman's love at this time will be fruitful. 13. One should sleep when the sun breath is working. 14. The charming of women, the control of a woman, and all acts of passion should be done on the sun breath. 15. The controlling of demons and ghosts, the entering of a big forest, the swimming of a river should be done on the sun breath. There will then be complete success. 16. All cruel actions performed on this breath will have the fullest effect of cruelty. 17. When both the breaths are working, neither the sun nor the moon actions should be performed. None will bear fruit. This is the time for meditation and yoga alone. 18. When debating, quarreling, or when enemies are attacking, or thieves are present, or one's superior is angry, the situation is fraught with danger when two breaths are working. 19. To enter a place on the moon breath, take even steps with the left foot first, 2, 4, 6, etc., and on the sun breath, odd numbers, and on the right foot first. This ensures success. 20. But never leave a place on a double breath, for it means death, loss, or pain. 21. Any action to the front, on the left or above, will be fruitful if performed on the moon breath. 22. Any action on the right, downwards, backwards, or in the middle, performed on the sun breath, will be fruitful. 23. The place of the moon breath is towards the east and north. 24. The place of the sun is towards the south and the west. 25. Do not go to the east or north when the moon breath is working, for there will be danger. 26. Do not go to the south or west when the sun breath is working, for there will be death. 27. If a question is asked in even letters when the moon breath is working, the answer will be favorable. 28. If a question is asked in odd letters when the sun breath is working, the answer will be favorable. 29. If the empty breath, shunya, no breath, or sukshmana, two breaths, the answer must be no, for all results will be futile on these breaths. 30. Victory attends those who battle on the sun breath. 31. If the battle is at a far distance, leave for it on the moon breath, but if it is near, on the sun breath. 31a. If during the fight the sun breath works quickly, conquest is certain. 32. If the moon breath is working, victory comes by mere remaining at home and being passive. 33.
The enemies are exhausted by this passiveness. Activity against enemies must only be taken on the sun breath. 34. On no account must one leave the house when the Sukshmana breath is working. 35. The oracle of breath unfolds its secrets to those who know the keys. 36. The life breath, or the moon breath, is a favorable breath. Captives will be released if the interrogator inquires of them on this breath. Stolen things will be recovered. If the question concerns a man supposed to have died in a foreign country, he can be assured that he is alive. 37. If the question is put on the empty breath, and then the life breath works, the man will have had an injury on his left side or on his head. 38. If the moon breath is working, all questions asked at the time will be favorable, unless the syllables of the question are odd. 39. In the same way, a question in even syllables, asked when the sun breath is working, will have an unfavorable answer. 40. Any questions pertaining to the length of life asked on the moon breath, or when it is near, when a patient is ill, means that the patient will not die. 41. If a person puts his question facing the directions or between the complete directions, then turning to a complete direction, the answer will be favorable. 42. If the questioner stands in the direction in which the breath comes out, the answer will be favorable, and by this you can know whether his objects are of the moon or of the sun, and which breath favors his projects. 43. The moon breath in the light half of the month and the sun breath in the dark half are the auspicious times. 44. Of the signs of the zodiac, 5 are of the moon breath, and are auspicious during that time, and 5 are of the sun breath, and are auspicious during that time. 45. The 5 pertaining to the moon breath are Taurus, Virgo, Scorpio, Pisces, and Cancer. 46. The 5 pertaining to the sun are Leo, Libra, Cancer, Aries, and Taurus. 47. The most effective days for the moon breath are Thursday, Friday, Wednesday, and Sunday, and in the light half of the month they are extremely auspicious. 48. The days for the sun breath are Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday, and they are very effective during the dark half of the month. 49. The elements in the breath are fire, water, earth, wind, and ether, or akash. 50. If the breath breathed heavily through the nostril touches the upper portion of the nostril, the element in force, then, is fire. 51. If the breath touches the bottom of the nostril, the element is water. 52. If the breath comes through the center of the nostril without touching the nostrils, the element is earth. 53. If the breath touches the left portion, the element is wind. 54. If the breath touches the right portion, the element is ether, or akash. 55. The fire element is the highest. 56. The earth element is in the middle. 57. The wind and the sky are in the vacuum. 58. The earth and water breaths are good. 59. The fire breath is neutral. 60. The sky and wind breaths are destroying breaths. 61. The fire breath gives pain. 62. The water breath gives relief. 63.
The infliction of pain should be done when the wind element is present. 64. The prevention of anything or the stopping of a person in an act should be done when the earth breath is present. 65. The fire element resides in the shoulders. 66. The wind, prabhajan element, lies in the navel. 67. The earth element lies in the thighs. 68. When the element is the earth breath, those acts which are to be permanent should be done. 69. Active things will be successfully done on the breath when the element registers the water breath. 70. Vigorous actions should be done when the fire element is working. 71. Killing or hurting a person should be done when the wind breath is working. 72. The ether breath never gives fruit either for good or evil. In this breath, one prays to God and becomes an actionless yogi. 73. In recapitulation, the earth and water breaths are for good results, the wind or fire breaths for destructive purposes, and the sky ether breath for any action whose fruit one has forfeited. 74. If a person asks a question at the time the earth element is in the breath, as regards his success, he will have some immediate benefit, but if at that time the fire or wind element is in the breath, he will have some positive loss. 75. The 5 elements of the sun breath at that time and their corresponding deities are 1. Fire with Mars as its lord. 2. Earth with the sun as its lord. 3. Wind with Saturn as its lord. 4. Water with Rahu as its lord. 76. The 5 elements of the moon breath take as their corresponding deities. 1. Water with Jupiter as lord. 2. Fire with Venus as lord. 3. Wind with Saturn as lord. 4. Earth with Mercury as lord. 5. Ether or sky with Jupiter as lord. 77. Each element controls 12 conditions, 6 of the earth and water, 4 of the fire and wind, and 2 of the ether. 78. They are 1. Satisfaction. 2. Nourishment. 3. Love. 4. Sport. 5. Victory. 6. Laughter. These 6 are the conditions pertaining to earth and water. 79. 1. Mourning. 2. Fever. 3. Shaking. 4. Traveling. These are the 4 conditions pertaining to fire and wind. 80. 1. Death. 2. Loss. These are the conditions pertaining to the sky ether. 81. The body consists of 5 elements: earth, fire, water, wind, and ether. 82. From the element earth we get bones, flesh, skin, veins, and hair. 83. From the element fire we get hunger, thirst, sleep, brilliance, and laziness. 84. From the element water we get semen, blood, fat, urine, and saliva. 85. From the element wind we get the power of running, bending, smelling, contracting, and expanding. 86. From the element ether comes love, hatred, shame, fear, and infatuation. 87. These are the descriptions of the elements. 88. The element earth is square, and of a yellow color. In its middle is sweetness, and it gives great enjoyment. The flow of the earth breath goes out to the distance of 16 fingers. 89. The element water is round and white. It has a bitter taste and gives benefit. The flow of the breath extends to the distance of 12 fingers. 90. The element fire is triangular and red and pungent. The flow of the breath is upwards, and 4 fingers in length. 91. The wind element is as green as the center of the moon and the sun. The flow of the breath is slanting and goes out a distance of 8 fingers. 92. The sky ether element is unknown and gives no fruit. 93. It has one great utility. It cuts away fruit and gives salvation. 94. The form of the element can be seen on the burnished mirror when it receives the impact of the breath. 95. Each element has its own direction and is strongest in its own direction. 1. The earth in the east. 2. The water in the west. 3. The wind in the north. And 4. The fire in the south. 96. On the first day of the bright half of the Chaitra month, corresponding approximately to July, Asak, if the sign of the ram is in the zodiac, the year is known by the breath. 97. If the breath holds the earth element, there will be no famine. There will be prosperity, plenty of rain, and happiness. 98. If the water element is in the breath, there will be too much rain, but the year will be good. There will be plenty of grain, and there will be no disease. 99. When the fire element is in the breath, there will be scarcity of rain, famine, calamity, and disease. 100. When the wind element is in the breath, there will be upheavals, worries, and very little rain. 101. When the sky element is in the breath, there will be no happiness, and the subjects will be unhappy. 102. If a person comes to question one when the left breath goes to the right and the right to the left, it is a good omen. 103. If a person questions one in odd letters and the sun breath is working, and in even letters when the moon breath is working, the answer is favorable. 104. If the sun and moon are in their own elements at the time of entering a place, it is auspicious, but inauspicious at the time of leaving. 105. If on the second day of the bright half of the month the moon breath is working, it is a good omen. 106. On Fridays, Thursdays, and Wednesdays, the moon breath is auspicious. 107. If a woman conceives in the breath of the wind element, the child will be healthy. In the earth element, there will be miscarriage, and if it lives, it will be unhappy. In the water element, the child will be wealthy and happy, and in the ether element, death or miscarriage. 108. If the full moon breath is on, the answer to the question as regards the sex of the child about to be born will be that of a girl, and if the sun breath is working, of a son. If the question occurs when the Sukshmana breath is on, the child will be a hermaphrodite. 109. If, when a child is conceived, there is the earth or water element in the breath, or if a question regarding the sex is going on during these breaths, then a son will be born. 110. When the wind element is in the breath, a girl will be born. 111. When the fire element is in the breath, there will be a miscarriage, and a hermaphrodite will be born when the ether sky is in the breath. 112. If both the breaths are empty, 2 girls will be born. 113. If the sun breath is working and the moon breath starts, or vice versa, a miscarriage will occur. 114. As regards diseases, if the earth element is in the breath, it will indicate much worry from all sides, and if the water element is there, it means lifelong anxiety. If the fire element is there, there will be worry about the blood, or juices. 115. The empty breath gives all kinds of worry in diseases. 116. Don't go out when the moon breath is working, and if a person comes at this time to ask about the directions, it is not favorable for his travels. 117. If a questioner comes and stands facing the empty direction, but afterwards stands towards the flowing breath, it will be auspicious. 118. If the sun breath or the moon breath changes its direction, then the person abroad of whom question has been made has started from his place. 119. If, when a question is put of an absent person, the water element is in the breath, the absent person will soon return. If the earth element is in the breath, then it means he is happy where he is. If the wind element, then he has gone away from that place, and dead if the fire element is in the breath. 120. If the sun and moon breaths are in their own elements and going with full force, a pilgrimage undertaken at that time will be auspicious. 121. If either the sun or moon breaths are going on when a person questions, it is good for the man who questions, but if the empty breath is working at the time, he will die. 122. If the empty breath has in it the elements of earth, he will die from an injury to the stomach. If the water element is there, an injury below the navel. If the fire element is there, heart disease. If the wind element, there will be an injury to the thighs, and if the ether element, to the head. 123. If the breath is not complete, however powerful a man may be, he will not conquer in any fight. 124. But if his breath attains complete force, he will be able to conquer the earth. 125. If, during a battle, the earth element is in the breath, the battle will be an equal one. But if the water element is there, there will be victory, and obstacles will occur if the fire element is present. If the wind or ether element is present, death. 126. If, at the time of fighting, the moon breath is present, the king will die. 127. If the sun breath is present, if the opponent is of equal strength, then the battle will end. 128. If the breath from a woman's left nostril, when the moon breath is working, is drawn into the right nostril of the man when the sun breath is working, or if a man kisses and embraces her at that time, she will be one for her whole life. 129. If the sun breath mixes with the sun breath, the yogi will get knowledge, and his austerities will not fail. 130. If in the morning the sun breath moves to the moon breath, and vice versa, the mind will be troubled. There will be loss of wealth, loss of desired things, of kingdom. There will be disease and death. 131. If this contrary breath continues for a fortnight, there will be an epidemic. 132. If this contrary breath continues for 2 fortnights,
one's brothers and friends will turn enemies. If for 3 fortnights, disease and death. 133. If one breath alone works for the whole day, death will occur in 3 years. 134. If the sun breath remains for a day and night, death will occur to you within 2 years. 135. If for 3 consecutive days and nights the breath continues in the same nostril, he will die in 1 year. 136. The Ida breath, the breath of the left nostril, is the river Ganges. 137. The Pingala breath, the breath of the right nostril, is the river Narmada. 138. And the Sushumna breath, the middle breath, is the river Saraswati. That is the conjunction, the Prayag, the great pilgrimage. 139. That is the supreme knowledge of the breaths. 140. Rechak is exhalation. Parak is inhalation. Kumbhak is retention. 141. Practicing them with controlled mind, inhalation gives strength, a controlled and purified body. Retention gives steadiness of mind and longevity of life, and exhalation purifies the mind. 142. The Shad Mukhi is an exercise to clean the nostrils. The 3rd and 4th fingers of each hand should close the lips, the middle fingers the 2 nostrils, the index fingers the eyes, and the thumbs the 2 ears. 143. Thus is known the form, the movement, the taste, and other qualities of the 5 elements, and the knower is a yogi. 144. He who knows the good and bad actions, and guides his life accordingly, will be religious, wealthy, get his desires fulfilled, and get salvation, fame, and power. 145. Purak is the inhalation from the right nostril. Kumbhak is retention of breath as long as it is possible. Rechak is the exhalation from the left nostril. 146. A man who seated in the lotus posture, Padmasana, controlling the lower breath of his body, drawing it upwards, mixing it with the life that runs through his body, joining his breaths in the Sushumna, taking it to Brahmarendra, a spot in the crown of the head, and mixes it with divinity, or Shiva, is a great yogi. 147. He conquers death. All desires are dead. He conquers the 5 senses, and cares nothing for the world, or cares for worldly things. 148. If a yogi can introduce the sun breath into the moon breath, he will live forever. 149. If for 16 continuous days the sun breath alone works, the man will die within 3 months. 150. If the sun breath works continuously by day, and the moon breath by night, he will die within 6 months. 151. The tongue is the Arunadati, the 8th star of the Great Bear. The tip of the nose is the polar star. The 2 eyebrows and the space between are the 3 steps of Vishnu. 152. If a person is to die within a short time, like 1 day, he cannot see his tongue, Arunadati. 153. Death will occur in 9 days if one cannot see one's eyebrows. 154. And death will occur within 5 days if one cannot see one's nose, the polar star. Thus ends the complete science of the breath, the Yoga Ha Ha